Hello and welcome to another video. I've recently completed The Last of Us Part 2 and there is a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, so let's just get into it straight away. One thing that I'd like to let you know before moving on is that I absolutely loved The Last of Us Part 1. I really loved the characters, the story, but the thing that I loved the most about the game was the game world itself. It was really interesting to me. The post-apocalyptic look and vibe of the game, the feel, it was just fantastic. I love zombie games, post-apocalyptic games, so it was natural for me to, fall in love with something as well done as The Last of Us Part 1. So when The Last of Us Part 2 came out on PC, I absolutely had to get it because I'd never played it before, though I did end up spoiling the story on myself back in 2020. Not the entire story, but the big thing about it. I was already aware of it. I don't really think it affected my experience with the game as much as I thought it would. But anyways, let's move on. So this title actually ended up confusing me because this game has things that I absolutely loved on one hand and then things that I absolutely hated on the other, which is usually not the case with me. I mean, I might dislike some stuff in a game, but I don't really go to that extreme of, hating it, honestly. So yeah, that's something new for me. So I'm gonna start with the things that I loved about the game and then move on to the ones that I absolutely hated about it. And keep in mind that these are just my opinions, you don't have to agree with them at all. The things that I really loved about The Last of Us Part 2 are the game world, the gameplay, graphics, and performance on PC. Like I said earlier, game world was the thing that I loved the most about The Last of Us Part 1, and I replayed it a couple of times just to experience the overgrown, beautiful post apocalyptic world again and again because I couldn't get enough of it. And coming into Last of Us Part 2, I was expecting to get a bigger experience, and that is exactly what I got here. It is way bigger in scale, and there is so much environmental variety present in the game. It's awesome. I loved the scenery throughout, and it was just an amazing adventure. I loved every bit of it, from the snowy mountains near Jackson to the rainy, cloudy weather of Seattle with its skyscrapers filled with infected and the city flooded all over. It looks amazing, and the vibe is just fantastic. The dry, sunny weather of Santa Barbara was a really nice addition towards the end, and the scenery was fantastic throughout the game. It was amazing and made the experience super immersive, and this is what I've wanted from this title, which is why I really enjoyed it despite of the things that I didn't like about it, because the game world is just amazing. It is really well done and it's filled with stories all over. You're gonna find letters and messages written by survivors, and reading those is really interesting. And exploration is always rewarded with weapon upgrade points and whatnot, and it is just a really, really good experience. The environments are filled with detail. There are small things that I really loved, like finding PS3s in houses with game discs and whatnot, and also the presence of PS Vita in the story itself, which was really, really cool. And it's not just about the look, the vibe, and the scenery of this post apocalyptic world, but also the survivors, the inhabitants of this dangerous, unpredictable world. They are also really interesting, especially there is this villainous group called the Seraphites, who were particularly interesting to me because of the way they communicate with each other by whistling, and also the way they execute people, which is really scary, to be honest. They had some personality. Then there is this another community called the WLF, which plays a major role in the story, and they are more like a generic military kind of group of survivors. They're fine, but the Seraphites really stood out for me. These hostile factions and their equation with each other, then different types of infected, both old and new, including the Rat King and the Shambler, along with the beautiful post-apocalyptic scenery throughout, makes for a really believable game world. I absolutely loved the journey through these environments from the beginning till the end, and I took my time exploring as much as I could. It's not an open world game, but it features bigger areas, open areas for you to explore, and it's perfectly done in that sense. It doesn't need to be an open world game, and this is like the best way to do it. It was just perfect in my opinion. This game has hands down one of the best post apocalyptic game worlds out there, and the game world alone makes it a must play title in my opinion. Then moving on, gameplay got a major upgrade in The Last of Us Part 2. Part 1 was a fantastic title, but when it comes to gameplay, it was basic at best, isn't it? But things have gotten way bigger and better in Part 2. See, the first thing is that you get to play as two different characters in the story, and they have their own fighting styles and set of weapons that they have access to. So that adds a good amount of variety when it comes to the combat. Melee combat is way more fun because now you can dodge attacks from your enemies, and also because the two playable characters, Ellie from The Last of Us Part 1 and Abby introduced in this game only, they have different fighting styles. In the absence of actual melee weapons, Ellie uses a knife in melee combat and she's all about speed, whereas Abby uses her bare hands and she is like a heavy fighter. She's more about raw power, brute force, and they have very distinct fighting styles, and both are amazing. The two different styles add variety to the gameplay, and not just when it comes to the melee combat but also in stealth. As Ellie uses her knife in stealth mode, and she can also sneak up on clickers and take them out using the knife, which is really cool because I personally was not a fan of, crafting shivs again and again in order to deal with the clickers. Whereas Abby, on the other hand, relies on her fists and shivs in order to deal with the infected in the stealth mode, and in order to take out the clickers, shivs are necessary for Abby. So, yeah, exactly the same as Jewel from Last of Us Part 1. I really loved the addition of Ellie's infinite knife or switchblade. It really made stealth more fun and speedy when playing as Ellie, allowing me to get more kills, and it was a big help when dealing with the clickers. One thing that's weird is that Ellie has an infinite knife on her, whereas Abby, who is a member of a more military kind of group of survivors, doesn't have a combat knife on her. It just didn't feel right to me. Anyways, moving on, stealth has also improved quite a bit because of the addition of the ability to go prone. You can hide in vegetation, and there is a lot of it in Last of Us. So, yeah, it's a really nice addition. And then you can also hide in water, as Ellie can now swim, which is also really nice. And then, stealth is also more challenging because there is a new enemy type, the dogs. They catch your scent and sniff you out, so you have to be very careful and take them out quickly, and also pray that no John Wick comes looking for you afterwards. I just loved the gameplay in Last of Us Part 2 because there is more of it in Part 2. There is lots of combat, lots of action, much more stuff, and it is just bigger and better, like I said, in every way. It is just a really nice experience. More enemy types, more challenges, more tools, and just overall a really nice experience when it comes to the gameplay. There was just one thing that annoyed me when it comes to the gameplay department, and it was when the switch happens from the first playable character Ellie to Abby halfway through the game. Abby comes in with a new set of weapons that you have to upgrade from scratch. It was really annoying because upgrading weapons is a slow process. By the time the switch happened, I had already maxed out a couple of weapons, I think, and when I was starting to feel confident that I'm going to take advantage of these upgrades, I was switched to a new character and I had to start from ground zero again, leveling up an entirely new set of weapons, which was a really cool set of weapons, but the process of upgrading those, it's not a very good feeling, especially for the first couple of hours playing as Abby. It was a feeling that faded away with time, but it really bugged me while it lasted. Overall, the gameplay is super fun, it really complements the setting, and both these things mixed together, they make the whole experience just fantastic. Stealth mechanics are tight, nice enemy variety, there is barely enough ammo to deal with all the threats that you run into, and you have to be careful with your resources, and you have to be patient as well in situations where you are dealing with lots of enemies, and you have to be smart basically. It just makes the whole thing believable, you are not a Rambo here, you have to be intelligent about it, and that is exactly what you want from a title like this, and it is just really well done. When it comes to the graphics, the presentation, it's just an amazing title to look at. It looks beautiful. The character models, the environments, everything looks really, really nice. The open areas, the indoors, the daytime sections, the dark sections, different weathers from the snowy Jackson region to the bright and sunny Santa Barbara, and of course the massive post-apocalyptic Seattle in the middle of it with its rainy, cloudy weather. Everything looked amazing. I particularly loved the rainy weather in Seattle, especially the Hillcrest part. It was the section where I was enjoying the game the most. I was like in a different zone with it. It was just a very immersive experience. The presentation, the game world, the gameplay, they all complement each other so well. And another good thing about this game is the performance on PC, which is way, way better when compared to The Last of Us Part 1, especially when it came out. And that is a major positive. Moving on, the sound design and the voice acting, they are both really, really good too. So these were the things that I really loved about the game, and now let's move on to the other side, the dark side. I'm not gonna try and sugarcoat anything, and keep in mind these are just my opinions, you don't have to agree with me at all. I think the story is a huge disappointment. Part 1 had a really special story and it really made me care about the characters. It ended up building a connection with the game world through the story and the way Jules' life changed after Ellie came in his life and their relationship and all that stuff. It was really beautifully done. Part 2 ended up almost completely destroying that connection for me, and it's not because of what happens right in the beginning of the story. No, I already told you in the beginning of this video that I was aware of that particular thing, the big thing that happens right at the start, and it was not a surprise to me. But it was actually the sexuality or hypersexuality of this title, the extent of it, which really made it a joke to me, and that's just the best way I can put it. It really was something that left a bad taste in my mouth, especially there was a particular portion towards the end of the game which was just ridiculous. They just completely destroyed the seriousness of the whole thing for me by forcing something to a ridiculous extent. This whole promotional campaign for normalizing things completely ended up destroying the feel of the story and ended up irritating me and just ruined the whole experience. And then there are other things as well. Before moving on to those, I'd like to point out a few things that I did like about the story. The Last of Us Part 2 made me love Joel and Tommy's characters even more. It was really nice to see the cool side of Joel and all the sections with him, they were just really special. The game really shows the true side of Joel. It really shows who Joel was before losing Sarah, and it's hard to not like him. His sections are really well done. Then Tommy was a character that I really loved in part 1, and part 2 made me like him even more. I just love his attitude towards his brother, the small conversation he has with Ellie regarding her equation with Joel really shows the care he has for Joel. It's something really subtle, but it tells a lot about his character, and I really loved how much of a badass he can be. There is a really cool section in the game where you get to experience his scary side, and it really feels like he is being trained by Deadshot from the DC universe. Tommy was a huge missed opportunity in my opinion. His adventures in Seattle were definitely worth experiencing. It would have been really cool to play as Tommy, but unfortunately, that's not the case. Still, I really liked what they did with his character. I loved the way they portrayed his expertise in combat, and overall, it made me love his character more, which is a positive. Another thing that I really liked in the story was the regrets Sally had in her heart regarding her behavior with Jewel. It really felt natural and also ended up giving a bit of a life lesson that life is way too short to be angry with those whom we love. Ellie's whole story would have been fine with me had they not gone to stupid extents to promote things. I actually preferred playing as Ellie despite of all the stuff forced into her storyline. She's someone I'm familiar with and she was a character I cared about from part 1. So when the switch happened, I was kind of frustrated for a while. Which brings me to the next thing that I hated about the game, and that is Abby's character. She is just a very boring character in my opinion. Initially, I thought that playing as Abby was something that's gonna last for maybe a couple of hours, but it's almost half of the game that you have to play as her. Her half of the game starts really slow. It takes a while for things to get interesting in terms of gameplay, and in terms of story, things never get interesting in my opinion. Her character is just boring throughout, and what I hated about all the Abby storyline was the fact that the game really tries to make you like her for some reason. Anyways, there are a few things that I did like about playing as Abby. First of all, her set of weapons. She has some really cool weapons. Her crossbow, her rifle, they are really nice. And then melee combat playing as Abby is different and probably more fun too because she is like a serious brawler and the finishers are like really fun. I preferred melee combat more as Abby when compared to Ellie, whereas in stealth mode, I would say Ellie is better. She comes in with a new set of characters. She belongs to a group called the WLF, and I did like two characters from her inner friend circle, Owen and Mel. Owen and Mel were two of the most sensible individuals in the entire WLF, and I liked Mel because she ended up speaking my mind about Abby's character at a particular point in the story, which I absolutely loved. Apart from those two characters, I also really liked the fact that I got to see more of the Seraphites while playing as Abby because I was really impressed by that villainous group and the way they were presented in the story. It was really well done. One really small thing that I did like about Abby's character was a vulnerability, a fear she had of something she is forced to face with in the story, and it's done really well. And it was the only part of the game where I actually liked the dialogues and her character a bit. The thing that I dislike the most about her story, apart from her boring character itself, is that the game wants you to understand her, which is fine by me, but it also wants you to like her by the end of her story, which is something that just didn't sit well with me. The change that comes in her character through the course of the story is way too abrupt, and it's like they were trying to do Jewel 2.0, and the kids who were a part of her story, they were just not as impactful. Simply put, her character ended up changing way too much, way too fast, and she was a boring character to begin with, and her muscular physique was not something that was helping either. She looks absolutely fine in her flashbacks, but later on ends up looking too big. Her character and story are really boring for the most part, but gameplay as Abby is actually pretty good, and certain sections of her portion are actually the best in the game, like traversing through an actual war zone where the infected and two different factions are having a full blown triple threat match, or traversing through skyscrapers and buildings filled with all sorts of infected and hostiles. Things do take a while to get interesting while playing as Abby, but once they do, they go all the way. But the problem was, throughout all of this thrill, I was always eager to go back to Ellie and complete the thing, which is something that tells me that I was not invested in Abby's story at all. Another thing that I didn't like that much was the game length itself. By the time I got to Santa Barbara, I actually wanted to see the credits as quickly as possible, despite of the fact that I was loving the scenery. Santa Barbara looks very different from anything that you get to see in the entire game before it, and I was really enjoying the look of it, but I just wanted to finish the thing. And it is usually not the case with me in a game like this where I'm loving the scenery and the gameplay as well. But I think by the time I reached Santa Barbara, I was done with the story and the characters. The affection for the characters I once loved was almost gone, and the new characters introduced were just way too boring for me to have any interest in. And I just wanted to get to the finish line as quickly as possible. It took me about 24 hours to complete the whole thing. I think it felt lengthy to me because I failed to develop any sort of connection with Abby's character, which is something that you want to have in a narrative driven title like this. I would have loved to play as Tommy instead of Abby. I think it would have been fantastic, but what we got instead was something that just didn't feel right to me. When it comes to the ending, I was not angry at all. I was actually happy that the whole thing was over because by that time I could barely feel anything about the story part. But I do think that the character that did the big thing in the beginning ended up paying a heavy price for it. So it was kind of okay. But overall, the story itself was not that good, and it got worse because of all the forced promotional stuff. The only character I would be interested in when it comes to The Last of Us in the future is Tommy. If I would have never played The Last of Us Part 1, I'd have nothing to hate about this particular title because then I wouldn't be interested in the story and the characters and what they did to the whole story and what they forced into it. But I did care about this title. I did care about the story and the characters, and I didn't like what they ended up doing in the end. So, yeah, gameplay wise, game world wise, it's a must play post apocalyptic title. I think it's a fantastic game, gameplay wise, game world wise, but when it comes to the story, it took a major hit. When we love a story in a game or a movie, we don't really want it to end, isn't it? But what confused me while playing this title was that despite loving the graphics, the gameplay, being a part of this beautiful, overgrown post apocalyptic world, it's one mighty adventure. It has so many environments and whatnot. The gameplay is really good. Still, I was very happy when the game ended, and I actually wanted it to end a couple of hours before, and it usually never happens, especially when I'm enjoying the gameplay in a title this much. It was because the link between me and the game world was missing, which is the story in a title like this. It took me a couple of weeks to complete the story. The first week was actually the best. I was fully immersed in the game, and at around the Hillcrest part was when the game was like peaking for me. Once the character switch took place, things started to go down in terms of story. And after Abby's portion was over, there was a section involving Ellie, which completely brought down everything for me. I was totally unplugged from the story and the characters afterwards, and I didn't really care about anything. I was just worried about completing the game and just getting done with it. For me, this title went seriously downhill in terms of story and characters, whereas everything else got bigger and better. Still, I think it's a must play title, but not for the story, which is actually really sad because the first game was a true masterpiece in that aspect. So, these were my unfiltered opinions on The Last of Us Part 2, and please don't forget to share yours down in the comment section. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Peace out.